Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Claims Never Sleep. I'm joined by my favorite co-host, Jen. Hey, Jen, welcome.
Very excited to be here today. I have not learned this much in years.
I know. I was just going to say to everyone, be ready to learn. Like I learned so much about energy. Like energy and how to reuse energy. So let me just backtrack. Today, we're joined by Rachel Thuerk, and Rachel's the Director of Risk Management at Vicinity Energy, and she is here to talk about really the exciting things that Vicinity is doing with reusable energy and steam. And I don't know, my mind was blown. Jen, sometimes your face was like, I can't believe I'm learning all this morning.
It is so fascinating, and just the way that they're using resources to create energy and being so creative in doing so, and the underground networks of pipes throughout Boston and Philadelphia and everything. You're going to have your mind blown.
Yes, absolutely. So with that, let's get it started.
This is the Claims Never Sleep podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Megan Henry.
Good morning, Rachel. Welcome to Claims Never Sleep. I am so happy to have you today. Welcome.
So thrilled to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you. And, as we were just talking about a little bit in our pre-podcast chat, you have such a different background than our typical guest who's in claims and risk management. Because a lot of times I start this podcast by asking our guests, like, how did you get into claims? It's typically not a linear path. And your path is absolutely not linear. And, so talk to me a little about it, because you went to school for engineering and now you're a director of risk management. So bridge it for us. Talk to us about what happened here. Tell us about Rachel's life story.
People wind up in risk insurance claims one of two ways, either through family, because somebody in their mom, dad, aunt, uncle was in the industry and got them an early job, or they got into it by accident. And I was absolutely 100% by accident. So I did my undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering. And as soon as I finished that, I knew I did not want to work as an engineer. I just didn't. It was not for me long term. And I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. I threw my resume up on monster.com because that's how old I am. And that was the only thing available, right? That was, we were starting to bridge the gap between physical paper resumes mailed in from newspaper ads into the digital world. And Monster was really there was no LinkedIn, there was no Facebook. There was Facebook. It was just the universities, though, at that point. And I think it was still called Facebook.
You had to have the school email address in order to get an account.
Yeah, you had to have .edu. Yeah, so I threw my resume up on Monster, and I got a call from an insurance brokerage. I was in New York City, got a call from an insurance brokerage down on Wall Street, and they said, hey, we're hiring in young, promising talent, and we're going to have them complete training programs. And this particular firm had a more intense culture and was pretty known in the industry for having an intense culture. And they struggled to retain their young hires. So people would leave after a year or two. Of course, knowing nothing about the insurance industry, I didn't know that going in. And I thought, okay, this is a 16-month training program. It's 4 months in 4 different areas of the firm. And all I thought was, oh, I'm 22. They're going to pay me to learn for 16 months, because you can't really do anything in any functional area in 4 months when it's new. Nobody expects that out of you. So I was like, they're going to pay me to learn. I'm going to get a paycheck. Step 1. I'm going to learn for 16 months. I'm going to learn about insurance, which I know nothing about. I didn't even really think of this as an industry that existed aside from my renter's insurance at the time. I didn't have any other concept of this industry existing on a broad scale. Had very little concept of the finance industry overall, and thought, well, everybody needs insurance. Worst case scenario, I do 16 months of this. I hate it. I come away with some general useful adulthood knowledge, and I go do something else. And I really liked it. I had no idea the scope of insurance. I just didn't. There's so much to it especially when you start to get onto the large complex commercial side of things. And I really wound up specializing in RFPs, M&A, and directors and officers and insurance for both nonprofits and financial institutions, hedge funds, mutual funds. It was sort of a weird grouping, but it was part of how the firm just was what they were particularly skilled at. It was a mid-sized brokerage, and they were particularly well known for their FinPro group. And they were also really well known for nonprofit work. So I ended up kind of splitting these things. I moved on to another smaller brokerage and did similar things for a couple of years. And then I got a master's in risk management because I was like, all right, I'm in.
Yeah.
I should probably get some actually foundational training in this job that I've decided is my career path now. So I did a master's at St. John's, which was formerly the College of Insurance. So it's pretty well known in the industry. That phenomenal program, just strong recommend if you're in the industry and thinking about furthering your education. I would do it again in a heartbeat. And after that, I decided I wanted to move to the buy side. I got really tired as a broker of going, this is the best program option, and having the answer always be, I want the cheap thing. And you're like, that's not actually gonna protect you. And I wanted to move to the side where I felt like I had more decision-making authority around a quality program versus any program that'll get me in the door for cheap. I will say, almost 15 years in on this side of things, I do understand better why sometimes the cheap thing is the answer. I didn't as a broker. I was like, but this one's really so much better. I get it. There's more business concerns than just the insurance. And sometimes those other business concerns do outweigh that decision. But now I have better insight into that. So I went to Harvard University, which I said earlier, I did D&O and E&O for nonprofits and financial institutions. Well, Harvard is effectively a hedge fund with a nonprofit attached.
Yeah.
A lot of our insurance programs were driven by the Harvard Management Company, which runs the endowment. Only some of the programs were driven by the actual school. And so I was at Harvard for just shy of 7 years, and I got a phone call in November 2019 saying, hey, there's this new company. It's a carve out from a large multinational environmental services company. They're going to be standing up their business on their own, private equity owned, and they need a new risk manager because the old risk manager is staying with the former parent. Are you interested? And I said, okay. It's a district energy company. And I was like, I will Google what that is. I had never heard of it. And so despite Harvard having 2 district plants, I didn't understand. I knew we had them. I just didn't know that this was also a large energy infrastructure beyond what Harvard did. So what district energy is we are thermal energy plants. We are centrally located plants in densely populated urban cores, and we make mostly steam. In a couple of cases, we make hot water, and in some of our more southern districts, we make chilled water, and this is all for domestic heat and cooling. And we send them out through distribution and attached to large commercial buildings. So we've got 13 districts across the country, and Boston, Cambridge, and Philadelphia are our 2 largest. The largest district system in North America is actually Con Ed in New York City, but that is all contained within Con Ed, the department. And so I learned a whole lot. And I went from being the person at Harvard who was responsible for errors and omissions, legal liability, international students, cyber, those more FinPro type risks, to hear where 50% of our risk is property. And I was like, I'm gonna become a property expert. So yeah, it's been so great learning. I also wanted the opportunity I am the whole department, right? So I am entirely responsible for all of insurance procurement, claims management. Any insured claim under any policy is mine to handle, including settlement negotiations, outside TPA management, managing attorneys, settlement negotiations, just all of it. So
Yeah.
insured claims, and risk control engineering for all of our power plants, because we have a very robust engineering program, because, what I will always say is my goal in life is to spend insurance premium forever and never need to use it. And so every penny we dedicate to preventative maintenance on the plant side will be beneficial in the long run. What is the expression is, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yes.
Same in preventative maintenance for power plants. So,
well,
and right back to mechanical engineering. So
I know. So yes. So you just brought me
my
full.
degree, I now go to the plants, do the engineering with an outside engineer, and I understand what they're talking about. And it's such a neat kind of.
You just brought me full circle, because that's what I was gonna. That's where I was like, oh my God, Rachel's setting me up for everything right now. But yeah, so I want to go back though to when you go to school for mechanical engineering, and then you must have gone to your parents at some point being like, okay, like I'm doing something different. Like how did that conversation go, and what was their reaction like?
Well, so I was always a super high academic achiever, and I have three and I have three younger sisters. My next younger sister was not. She really struggled. She's dyslexia. It took her a long time to really kind of catch up. And so by the time I was in college, my parents were very focused on whatever my siblings had going on, and just thought I'd figure it out. I don't think it ever crossed their minds to wonder or worry.
You kind of did,
but I doubt it ever even crossed her mind to think, oh, she's not going to be an engineer. What will she do? It's just, she'll get a job. She'll be fine. She'll figure it out. And by the time I was in middle school, my parents stopped attending things like parent-teacher conference. They just didn't. They're like, you'll tell us if it's a problem. We'll just let you go. But I was the kid who by 7th grade had mapped out every class I planned to take through high school. So I'm not exactly your typical student.
They didn't have to worry about you.
My kids my own kids need a little more management, a few more guardrails. Did you do your homework? I don't think I ever got asked once in my life, did you do your homework? Because it would never have occurred to me to not to.
Yeah. I had to ask that question every day. More so, did you brush your teeth?
Did you brush your teeth? That one I had to be asked. I got really good at it once I got braces. That was the real motivating factor to take that on as my own responsibility.
I don't understand how that is the thing you forget. I'm like, it's the first thing I want to do when I wake up.
And I do now as an adult, but I'm a little more empathetic to my kids not feeling like that, and I don't know why.
So earlier in the conversation, I'm assuming we're all around the same age based on the Facebook conversation. So what got you into engineering in the first place? I mean, I know there's such a push right now to get women into STEM, but back in, I guess, late 90s, early 2000s,
I graduated high school in 2001.
Same as me. That's
I, in middle school, was part of a creative problem-solving competition called Odyssey of the Mind.
Yes, we have it at our school.
Okay, it was.
I think my daughter's doing this thing right now too. She's like designing something for Shark Tank-ish.
we were a team, so you can have a team of 5 to 7. Most teams have 7, and we were a team of all girls. We were basically a social experiment for one of my friend's moms, who is a psychologist who believed that women would thrive in the absence of men. And so she put together this all-girls team and said, we're going to do the technical challenge, not the theater challenge, not the balsa wood challenge. We're gonna do the technical challenge, and we did it 3 years, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And in 6th grade, we won our state competition and went to Worlds. And
wow!
What did you
grade, make? What was
what?
What
it was called? The Mail Must Go Through was the problem, and it was where you had packages, 2 different size packages and 2 different kinds of envelopes. And they started on one end of the floor space. and you had to move them and sort them into the other end of the floor space, and each kind had to go into a separate area, and you couldn't enter the central place. So you had to build a system to move your mail across. And we used, do you know those like pop together climbing structure toys? Like, we used one of those and made a hand crank and a conveyor belt. And we made, because you had to put them in like a non-sorted order to get it to make your mail, to get all of your points. And we made little bars. So we had a high bar and a lower bar with slide arms. And so our taller boxes would slide to a big catch box on one side, the smaller boxes to the other. And then we weighted the envelopes with washers on one side at the end. And we had a little just board at the end, and they would flip off each way into their separate pieces. And then we used string to just pull them into their appropriate spaces. And so it was our lowest tech thing that we did in the 3 years. We did it with a Wizard of Oz theme, and I was the Tin Man. And we won, and you do a performance with it. And so we had I was one of the building girls, and we had a couple of girls who were great actors, and a couple who did our dialogue who were really, really funny. And so we just worked as a team together really, really well. And then the second year we did something with, we did a car one, and we made it a shopping cart. And I remember that one a little bit less because we won our small region and went to states and came in second in states and didn't get to go to Worlds. But then our third year, we built, it was called Omer Droid. So Omer is the mascot for Odyssey of the Mind, OM, or was in the mid-90s. And so Omer Droid was, you're supposed to make this robot. And so me and one other girl built the robot, and while other of our teammates worked on, scene and set and costumes and dialogue and all of these things. And again, we won states and went to Worlds. And we named her Anne Droid, and she had to do different things. So like one was playing a piano, so her hand went up and down onto keys, and she simulated walking forward. We had her on a platform with wheels and had her in a long, do we have a long dress? I don't remember. But mounted her feet on opposite sides of the wheels, so it looked like she was walking. She turned her head back and forth. Wow. She lifted her hand over her head. And then we had one like mystery, and we turned it all on at once, and we called it disco dancing. And it was phenomenal. And building that robot was like, this is the way my brain wants to work. And it's a very long story, but once I finished that was 8th grade. I was like, I want to do engineering. What I really wanted to do was be an Imagineer at Disney and make the animatronics in the rides. Turns out there are very few jobs in that. And I needed a paycheck more than I needed to wait them out.
Well, and it's not surprising that's like where you wanted to go, because after like building the robot, you were probably like, this is my jam.
That's exactly the thing I wanted to do. And look, you adjust as an adult. Everybody sort of, I think, has that sort of aspirational career. And
I'm wondering if
that's a really long story for how I wound up as a mechanical engineer.
I'm wondering because my daughter's doing something like this at school, but I don't know if it's Odyssey of the Mind. Like but it's some national competition that they're designing. It has to be recycled materials or something, and whatever the theme is for this year. But I haven't heard anything about this performance side, so maybe it's something slightly different. But she's making.
I don't know that Odyssey of the Mind is still running in quite the same way that it was at the time, but
I think it is. We had a meeting. They came to our PTA meeting last month, and we're really trying to encourage my 10-year-old. She's a 4th grader, and she has such a STEM mind. Like she's math and science scores are just out, like off the charts. And I really want to facilitate that. And my husband's a big math and science guy, so he's very excited about it. And he has been begging her to do Odyssey of the Mind for the past couple weeks.
It was absolutely life changing, right? It changed my entire trajectory, having competed in it. And I would also put in a strong recommend for an all-girls team.
Well, and that's, I know, kind of taking a little bit of a pivot, like out of the 7 girls who were on your team, did it kind of encourage everyone to go into the engineering field, or?
The two of us, so there was me and another girl who did the majority of the build, and both of us went to school for engineering. I don't think any of the rest of them did, but none of the rest of them were that interested in that part of things. So I know one became a teacher, one became a writer. I mean, all generally successful and, well-rounded.
Well, also there's like a theatrical part of it too. So it's not just, I mean, it's a full STEM, really. It's kind of like a full STEM experience. So it gets
STEAM, right? It includes the art part.
The art part, yeah, STEAM. Well, that's fascinating. Now I'm going to look into this as well. But okay, so then come full circle, as you said. So now you have this engineering background, and for a long time, you're not totally utilizing it. And now you can pretty much be on the floor, so to speak, at Vicinity, and like be able to understand what's like the mechanics and the science behind everything.
Yeah, it's really the best part of my job, is going to visit the plants and talking to the plant operators and the plant management and seeing the plants in person, because each one is just a little bit different, operates just a little bit different, has just a little bit different equipment, different, different metrics, different kinds of customers. So our main customers, our priority one customers are hospitals. Right? Something I didn't think of before I got here is that all hospitals, biotech, pharma research, anybody with an autoclave has to have a high pressure steam system. So every hospital is either tying into a system like ours or has their own high pressure steam plant on campus. And once you have a high pressure steam plant, you now need licensed operators. So either you're running a full power plant, a full thermal power plant at your campus, or you're tying into a system like ours. Obviously, there's a real benefit if you don't have to run your own, you can tie into ours. So we monitor our pressures and temperatures really, really closely at our hospital customers. So in Massachusetts, our largest customer is Massachusetts General Hospital. And in Philadelphia, it's the University of Pennsylvania, but we also serve their hospitals and Thomas Jefferson University Hospital. So
how do you serve these hospitals? I mean, I know I'm again taking us on some pivots, but I'm trying to like picture this in my mind. Like how does this work?
We have large boilers in Cambridge and in Philadelphia. We also have combustion turbines, and we use the combustion turbines and something called a HRSG, which is a heat recovery steam generator, and then a steam turbine to generate electricity. And then we recover the heat and turn that into steam, which is wildly more efficient. We can produce electricity the way any other sort of natural gas burning power plant would, but then we recover that heat and turn that into steam and send steam out through distribution pipes that we own. So through the city of Boston, through the city of Cambridge. And yeah, we tie into their equipment at their building site.
And so then you also have a big
dramatically lower emissions to be tied into a commercial plant than for, I mean, obviously the hospitals would need the high pressure regardless, but for say a large apartment building, something like a large Macy's or the aquarium. So the aquarium here has a large central tank. We heat, our steam is what heats that tank. Way more efficient to have them all tied into one central system than to have each building have its own boiler, right? When you're talking about greening the future and energy efficiency, even in our current state, which is changing, I'm sure Megan's going to want to get there, but even at our current state of burning natural gas, our combustion turbines are as efficient as the average grid plant, and we're recovering all of that heat in order to make steam. So even at our current state, we are a far more carbon effective way to heat buildings in large downtown areas.
Yeah.
And so do you have a large plant in Philadelphia, or do those hospitals?
Yeah, we also have it's called a combined cycle plant, combined heat and power. And we have that same kind of setup in Philadelphia. We don't have those in some of the other districts that are smaller, Baltimore, Trenton, Kansas City, Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Grand Rapids. Those are kind of our main districts. We don't have combustion turbines at those. Those grids sort of don't have the same demand for it, at least for now. Those are just boilers.
Yeah.
But in Boston, that our fuel sources are changing. So
that's amazing, and can eventually like non-commercial people like tap into your system? Is that something that would be a future?
Probably not likely that any individual homeowner would ever get there, but certainly we serve apartment buildings.
Yeah.
It just has to be at the building level. So when you're talking about, steam is only really efficient over short distances. So once you start getting into areas where it's a lot of single family homes, the distance over which you can send this, it just the ability to transfer that heat just really drops off. So large apartment buildings, absolutely. In downtown cores, absolutely. But once you start getting to suburban areas, it's really not gonna work as well. Those people would be better served looking at heat pumps. But,
so what?
This is fascinating. Thanks.
So what, in your role, like what do you identify as like your largest risk factors?
It's our stuff, right? So we are
kind of figured that, but
we are 13 districts. We have a little over 500 people total across everywhere, right? Power plants are pretty well managed. I mean, we have maintenance staff during the day, but we can run a whole power plant with 2 or 3 people overnight.
Yeah.
The people coming in to do the work on this, we have more than that at any given time during the day, but just keeping it running doesn't require a huge number of bodies. So it's the vast majority of our risk is in making sure that this large industrial equipment continues to operate well. And some of it's very old. So this technology has been around for like 150 years.
I mean, yes, it was the steam train. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean the districts.
Yeah.
With the energy, like the way we've heated homes and apartments this has been around since the late 1800s. Our Cambridge plant, we have our like office building and a little bit of a warehouse is called the Carriage House. It used to be part of Cambridge Power and Light, and it's called the Carriage House because that's where the horses were kept that brought the coal to the plant.
Yeah. Oh, I love
it. That's how long some of these systems have been operating. Our Philadelphia building, the new building, is from 1914. The old building is from 1902. That's how long some of these systems have been operating. Yeah. And so I would love to talk about fuel changes in the industry, if that's all right.
Yes, get into it.
So, super neat thing about being in district energy right at this moment is every 20 to 40 years, district energy has gone through a fuel source change. Now you think we already have the pipes laid, the big pipes that go around the city, right? Individual customers get laid one at a time, but we own the distribution. Distribution's out there. The steam is steam. It's steam. It's hot water. We make water hot. We make water cold. The distribution only needs to carry steam. It doesn't much matter to the system or to any of the customers how the steam became steam, right? So at the start of the industry, we're talking about coal. Mm-hmm. And in the 1930s and 40s, we moved to fuel oil. And in the, say, 80s and 90s, there were a couple of stages of fuel oil, a couple of different kinds. 80s and 90s, we started to move towards natural gas. Mm-hmm. And now we are looking at electrification. And we are in a really unique position. We've got our first electric boiler installed in our Cambridge facility. So Cambridge is our bigger plant, and it serves both Boston and Cambridge. We've got pipes across the Charles River. So that facility is our biggest plant, not by area, but It's our big plant in this region. And we've got our first electric boiler installed there, and we are in the engineering and design phase of installing the largest heat pump complex in North America at that same plant that will take heat out of the Charles River, use that heat to make steam and return the river water colder than it was. And when we do this, right, when we turn to just electrification, and if we buy pure renewable sources, and we can also, because we're a power producer, we can buy at non-retail rates, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we can buy power directly from Vineyard Wind, as though, Vineyard Wind is the first offshore wind project in the US, one of the first, if not the first, and that's coming on in multiple stages. As that ramps up, we'll be able to take on a lot of that power, and so we can then. I mean, it's not quite like this. It's years to get these projects going, but once we switch fuel sources, we can effectively electrify the heat and hot water for hundreds of thousands of square foot of space, homes, stores, hospitals. And Boston in particular has something called BERTA, which is a building emissions regulation that it really limits the amount of carbon a building can produce by square footage and occupancy. So buildings signing onto a system like ours, if they are on the electric portion of our steam, can dramatically reduce their emissions to meet those standards basically in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
In terms of large scale and infrastructure projects, the blink of an eye. So right now we're doing it in Cambridge because Boston has the strongest regulatory support for it. Mm-hmm. But we are absolutely looking at more green energy projects. We are citing some in Philly. We're looking at doing feasibility studies in Philly. Philly also recently completed a reverse osmosis project to take water out of the Schuylkill and clean it to use it for steam. So cleaning the Schuylkill and making domestic heat and hot water more efficient in Philly. We're looking at similar projects in Baltimore. Kansas City is they're talking with their local utility, their local electric producer, to put in potentially battery storage, because that utility is producing more solar than it has capacity to distribute at any given time. And they're looking for load shifting, right? Solar is bright during the day, but goes away at night. So you want to shift that load into the evenings when people can keep using it past when the sun goes down. Wind is sort of the opposite. Wind blows heavy from midnight to 4 a.m. is your biggest time. So you want that load shifted into the mornings. So there's going to be some battery options to do those load shifting. And because we're a big enough player, we have the opportunity to really kind of tap into some of those markets.
Well, what I love about this though is like your target, like not your target markets, but your main markets are these like old cities, right? And it's like old infrastructure, but these very modern, forward-thinking technologies, but also utilizing some of the infrastructure that's already there.
It's already in the ground. Like I said, and the building doesn't care whether the steam came from coal or diesel or natural gas or electricity, right? It doesn't matter. Steam is steam to the buildings and to the customers. And we can just eliminate huge chunks of carbon out of old infrastructure, which is really, really hard to retrofit individually. So it's a super exciting time to be in the space.
It's really smart.
So as you can possibly hear the banging that's going on in my house, we're redoing the kitchen, and we got rid of our natural gas and put in an induction stove because our hope is that we can eventually move to either solar or geothermal heating in our house. And so I had no idea that this was going on in such like a large scale, especially in Philadelphia. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's happening really fast, but also really slow. We'd love for it to be done today. But these projects, especially because we are sited in densely populated urban cores, we have to be extra careful about our engineering. You have a power plant way out in the middle of nowhere and something goes wrong. You want everybody to be safe, but it's not quite the same thing as blowing up downtown Cambridge.
Yeah.
So it's like we over-engineer versus some of a more traditional power producer would.
Yeah. And you touched a little bit about this before, but I mean, how are the risks that you're seeing at this current job so vastly different from the risks that you've seen at your previous jobs?
Well, so I would say, and I would have said it then too, Harvard only has one material risk, and that's intellectual property. Because Harvard has such an enormous endowment, they have such a strong brand, they have so much natural resiliency built in. Loss of a building, even loss of the power plants would be a bad day, but it wouldn't be brand ending, university ending. Even a large cyber breach wouldn't be university ending. So to me, the only real risk is an inability to protect your professors and researchers' intellectual property is what I believe is Harvard's only real fundamental risk, because that's what it all is. That is all. Harvard is a thought production machine. That's what they're there to produce.
Yeah.
An education, but they are primarily a research institution that also educates basically future researchers. So you want to protect Harvard, but protecting their physical plant is fine to be left up to the local folks. The business school has their own facilities people. They know what's going on in their buildings. The medical school knows what's going on in their buildings. And you can rely on those local facilities people because you don't want them to have a loss. And if they ever ask for support, you bring in engineers. If they think, oh, we want to redo this, but we're not sure what the best way, you bring in that support, but it's not existential to the business. If Harvard loses any given building, it'll be a bad day, but it won't catastrophically affect the brand. Here, that's completely different, right? We are not Harvard. We are somebody basically nobody had ever heard. We didn't exist 5 years ago. I mean, the infrastructure all did, but Vicinity as a name, as a brand, E-Steam, what we're doing in this space, none of that existed 5 years ago. So our brand is still pretty tenuous. We're still building those relationships, especially in local governments and with environmental groups. So having a really bad property failure, being unable to serve a hospital would be an existential threat. And so that's why I said our hospitals are our number one. In our bigger facilities, we have multiple redundancies and contingency plans and mobile boilers. If we have to take a line down, we can move a mobile boiler in to keep our most important customers online. So
because I can imagine
it's definitely our biggest risk for sure, but it's also we live by N+1.
Right.
And if we hit N+1 and we're not sure if, say, the temperature is going to drop, we'll bring another boiler up. Better to have to be burning extra fuel and ready than to risk ever losing pressure.
Right, because I mean the snowball effect of that risk is large. Like if your systems fail, you're not heating the hospital, their systems start failing, then it all from a risk perspective, that can mount very quickly, especially when you're talking about
then you're talking about our own property plus liability to anybody's buildings that are low pressure event damage. If a hospital loses pressure off of us, they lose their ORs, and it takes a full 24 hours to reinstate the ORs from when we get pressure back on. So we really focus a lot on not doing that. Yeah,
and that's a risk that up until when I first started talking about it, it's not something that would even cross my mind, about the infrastructure behind running a hospital.
I didn't know. I don't blame anybody for not knowing. I didn't know until I sat in this chair doing this job.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And so, but you were saying so you're like a one woman team though. So you're handling.
I'm the whole department.
Here we are, right here in the spot.
This is the risk management department of Vicinity Energy.
How large is the company as a whole, and how have you grown since you started?
We're about 500 and I want to say about 550 employees, maybe a little bit less. It's only a little bit bigger than it was when I started, maybe about 75 people. Some of that's on the corporate side, right? Because we had to hire, I started 2 weeks after the creation of the company. So I was on the earlier side. For anybody who didn't come over with the sale, I was on the earlier side. So we had to build out some sales staff, and we had to build out some financial staff. So like a lot of that is just sort of corporate back end stuff that got hired in. And we've acquired 2 districts, a small district at the Watergate in DC, and a larger district in Morgantown, West Virginia, that serves West Virginia University since I started. So those each come with, a handful of people. And then we are now operating a waste to energy plant in Kent County, Michigan, which is in Grand Rapids. And those waste to energy plants, these trash burning power plants, are much more labor intensive than our natural gas plants. Obviously, they have a lot more stuff coming in and out. They have a lot more emissions regulations and protocols they have to follow. So I want to say that's about 50 people in that plant, I think. So that was a pretty big chunk of headcount when they came over.
So I know you have the background in mechanical engineering, but from like an environmental or sustainability perspective, is that something that always interests you as well?
No.
Now, I love the honesty.
It does now.
Right, of course.
When I was 18 and going into mechanical engineering, I'd been hearing about global warming, it was called at the time. Now we call it climate change. And I thought to myself, the grown-ups will figure it out. They didn't.
And here you are, figuring it out.
Didn't. And then, and then I became a grown-up, and I went, shoot, I really thought they would have figured this out before me, but at least I'm here in this seat trying to help move. It feels good to be in a place where we are actively moving in that direction. So, I had full faith that if I'd been hearing about it since I was a small child, that by the time I became a grown-up, it would have been figured out. I had way too much faith in grown-ups.
Yeah, I know. I always did too. I still do.
I really didn't. Waiting for the other grown-ups at all at the time.
Yeah. But so let's talk a little bit though about the claims that you see, because I imagine any of the claims you see are primarily property type damage claims and not necessarily personal injury type claims.
We don't have, knock on wood, we don't have property claims. We have mild, we have things that need repairing and things that fail that get fixed.
Sure.
But none of it in my almost 5 years here has risen to the level of an insurance matter.
Okay. That's a good run.
And it's good. And we work really hard at the engineering program, at responding to recommendations from the outside engineers, at preventative maintenance, at over-engineering because of our locations, because of the kinds of customers we serve. I personally think we're an excellent risk in the energy space. Energy is not a risk-free operation at all, but in terms of other energy assets, I think we're just a high-quality insured. We do get some, because we own the distribution network, right? Yep. We do get some minor burns. We get some trip and falls outside. If somebody's walking on the sidewalk in Philly and it's this big of a lip and somebody trips, I get a phone call. So we have, I would call them nuisance claims mostly. The volume of claims are either nuisance and the occasional workers' comp. Again, energy is not a risk-free space. We try really hard to keep our recordables low and try and remind people that safe working is the most important. Every single person in the company is authorized to stop work at any time if they feel it's unsafe. So we have those protections. I talk to my drivers occasionally and I say, because Boston and Philly, these are frustrating places to drive.
They
People are jerks and they're trying to cut in. And I just tell them, you don't care. You don't care that they're jerks. You are not in a hurry. You are hourly. You are union hourly. If it takes you 10 extra minutes to get there, that's fine. You are never in a hurry. They want to cut it. You let them. You're zen. You'll get there when you get there. And I hope it sinks in because there's just no reason to be doing anything but the slowest, safest driving when you're operating work trucks in the city. So
And can you think of
you are never in a hurry to get to that manhole.
can you
It'll
think of
still
like
be
two
you are
worse
just-
places to drive than Philly and Massachusetts?
Boston is really a
Los Angeles too.
yeah. Philly's also pretty bad. My sister lives in Philly, and we were there a couple of weeks ago, and it was like some of the maneuvers. It's like that was in fact a red light, and apparently in Philadelphia, a red light is a suggestion.
Yes.
So with this,
So we have almost no auto claims, so.
Oh, well, maybe your messaging is getting through to
almost
everyone.
none. And the ones that we have are like swiped a mirror of a parked car. It's busy city. It's tight roads, especially Boston. I don't worry about those.
Well, I imagine part of your challenge though too is also like when on the insurance side, when you are trying to secure insurance for a vicinity, is almost educating the insurers about what coverage you need and your risk factors.
Huge. It can be really challenging, particularly on the liability side, because we are unusual. There are more districts. We are the largest district energy company in North America. I said Con Ed is the largest single district. There are districts across the country. There are only a few other commercial operators, though. A lot of these districts belong to their local power utility or the city. And so they kind of get underwritten with a larger grouping of assets. So if you're like the local power utility and you run the district, no underwriter is looking at your thermal plant as the driver of your losses. If you're a city, nobody is looking at your thermal plant and your steam pipes as the driver of your losses. So they just sort of get ignored in some of these other aspects. So when they come to us and try and rate us, look, on the property side, it's usually fine because it's the same kinds of assets, like a combustion turbine and a steam turbine. These are things we understand in the property and engineering side of things. It's the liability where we really struggle to get insurers to fundamentally understand. Again, comp and auto are the same, right? Driving trucks around a city, people working in power plants, they have got this down pat. But for general liability and excess casualty, we struggle with getting insurers to understand that we are exclusively a business-to-business operation. We frequently get rated as though we are attaching to individual consumers the way your gas utility or electric utility would. And obviously those risks are so much higher when you're B2C, and we just don't have any of those. All of our service contracts are other businesses. I mean, we do heat other individuals' apartments, but it's our responsibility ends at the meter. So our steam is metered, it goes into the building. All of the equipment on the other side of that meter belongs to the building. So trying to get the insurers to wrap their brains around that is a challenge. And they don't always get there. You know, honestly, there are some insurers we can't work with because they just can't rate us in a way that makes sense for our actual exposure.
And I just, I imagine it's just it's like,
I spent a lot of time. You notice I am not, in fact, somebody who works in one of the district energy plants. I'm the insurance professional. I know a lot about the plants and the operations and how it all works because I've had to educate our property insurers and our liability insurers and our auto insurers. I've had to talk to so many markets about where the risks actually are and how they differ from, like I said, a traditional power producer or a traditional utility. And I spent a lot of my time doing it. And it's neat stuff, so I'm happy to talk about it over and over, but it does.
Well, this is why I think you're like the absolute perfect person for your job, because you have the engineering scientific background, but you also have you're really great at explaining things, and like you could straddle both sides. So I feel, I don't know. I feel like you found
I found a good spot. Yeah, the ability to communicate in both directions is, I will say, not common for people who sit in my role. Right? Most risk managers, most insurance professionals know the insurance really well. They don't always know the operations really well. I'm going to put in a little plug. I actually am sending an article into Business Insurance later this week about risk managers attending their risk control engineering surveys. So look out for that in the next couple of months. So everybody look for my article. But yeah, you gain so much insight by physically going to the plants. I have the extra benefit of knowing what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But I think even without that engineering background, just physically being in the plants, walking the plants, not just as a tour, but with the engineer, watching what the engineer is looking for. You do enough of them, you start to learn, even if you don't have the same engineering background that I do.
Yeah.
But yeah, being able to talk to plant operators and maintenance mechanics and insurers and executives, and meet them all exactly where they are and with the level of understanding that they have, is so valuable.
Yeah, do you find that like within your company, you're like the translator between like the office and the plant? Like let's bring Rachel in, she'll explain it to us.
Sometimes, but really, even in corporate, we have some phenomenal engineering staff.
I'm sure.
So they really, when it's more operations related, we rely on them. So yeah, our COO and our SVP of operations are they're incredible and so easy to talk to. So there's been times I've had to bring them in where I'm like, I know what the engineer is talking about. And I'm having a hard time explaining it to my executives in a way that they're then going to fund the thing I want done.
Yeah.
So then I'll bring in the engineers and be like, please tell them why we need to pay this for this upgrade, because it doesn't always sound like the big deal that it is.
Yeah. And I imagine, do you like going from like when you're in school being like, okay, I want to be an engineer, this is the path I want, and then knowing where you are now, like, do you like with your own kids, because like, right now, like I feel like kids they tell you what they want to be, like what is like your reaction, or how do you react when I'm sure your kids like, oh, I want to be X, and knowing like the progression that you went through, like what kind how do you respond to them?
My boys both tell me they want to be professional lacrosse players or sports commentators. And I'm like, cool. Let me explain to you how you get into the very best schools in order to play D1 lacrosse. Because if you don't, like, I always try to tie it back to, like, if you've got to start in middle school academically to make it through high school academically to make it to these big name schools, places like Johns Hopkins, University of Maryland, Princeton. These are big deal schools and they're the biggest names in lacrosse. And if you want to go to one of those, you got to start preparing now. And they kind of look at me wide-eyed. I'm like, oh,
yeah, and you were
don't play
so
D1, you're probably not going to go pro. You do what you want.
Yeah.
Do the homework or not. I'm not fighting with you on it, but if that's really your long-term goal, it's not just the practices, it's not just the extra wall ball, it's not just watching film, it's the academics too that'll actually get you there. So I do tell them that, and I'll say my littlest one last year had a community members unit in school for like her social studies, and it was talking about the teachers and the nurses and the postal workers, police, fire department, all of these people in your community who support a functioning, healthy community. And then they asked, like, what do you want? And she drew a picture of me in my hard hat and wrote, I want to be a maker of electricity like my mom.
Oh.
I can support that.
Yes.
Getting into the energy industry.
Frankly, she has a more realistic path than the professional lacrosse
player. Yeah, I mean, I can get you do okay in school. I can get you a job in energy, no problem. I can get you a good union job without ever going to college. No?
Yeah. Well, and it's just so like you and I talked about this because my older one wants to be a mechanical engineer as well, and she understands like the rigor of her path. But again, she's 12 or almost not even 12 yet, so I'm like this might change, but I'm all for it. I pushed it. I was like, yeah, if this is what you love, but I don't think she actually understands yet that it's going to be very hard. Like right now, she sees it as
I didn't understand until I was in college how hard it was going to be.
Yeah.
Because I was someone for whom school came so easy, all the way through middle school and high school. I just never had to work very hard at it. And that's just luck, right? I didn't do anything to earn that. I just got lucky that school was easy. And then when I got to college level courses, that rigor was a real shock. and having to really study was new. That was hard.
Yes.
I wish I had learned to study younger, because
Yes.
the social pressures of studying versus not are a lot harder in college than they are in high school.
Yeah. I mean, I was
When
always a
everybody's
keen
parents are
studier.
making them do their homework. Whereas in college, you are sort of on your own to manage your own time and output.
Yes. I do think, at least what I notice from school right now, I think they're, at least at our school, they're trying to teach them how study and different methods of studying. I feel like they're doing that more than like actual content. It's like how to organize themselves and prepare for a test versus like in
That's
elementary school, it's like they could just take a test and that, like, it's like they go review it 1,600 times, so it doesn't really matter. Now they're teaching them these study method tools so they can decide what kind of works for them.
I could have used that,
Yeah.
because I remember like spelling tests, and I'd come into school and I'd have friends and be like, "Oh, did you study for the test?" And I was like, "It's spelling. Like, I just write the words. I don't understand. What do you mean study for a spelling test? All I have to do is write down the words when the teacher says the words." I just couldn't even make sense of what they were talking about. Study for a spelling test. And it didn't serve me in college. I mean, it worked out in the long run. I did fine.
Yeah.
It did not serve me in college to not have those skills.
Yeah, it's it's a whole new ball game too. And then, you think about it too. You in high school, you could be, there's all different people from all different like learning backgrounds, and you could be at the top. But then you're at the top, and then you go to this top university with everyone else who is at the top of their school. So now you're all in the same classes together, and it's very eye opening. You're like, oh wait, I am not the smartest person in this room anymore.
Yeah, I remember one of our freshman orientation groups. It was a group of like 20, and one of the questions was, how many of you were valedictorian? And it was like 5 of us. It was like, oh, okay, that's a different different experience than my public high school in Northeast Florida, where I think we only had like a 65% graduation rate. So it was like,
yeah, it's like, I think it's eye opening, I think for anyone who's like a high overachiever, and then
It
you go
is-
in this environment, you're like, oh wait, like I'm
It
not
can
so
be very
special anymore.
jarring.
Yeah.
Well, so it can be so jarring that at MIT, which is going to be obviously your absolute top achievers are getting into MIT. Their whole freshman year is pass, no record. Either you pass the class or it never appears on your transcript, because the kids are so high pressure on themselves. It's not this university do. I mean, I'm sure the university, some of it is social, but on themselves, that the possibility of them failing a class is so anxiety provoking that it was dangerous for student mental health.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, all freshman year is pass, no record, because that's the kind of kids you attract at a school like MIT.
Yeah. It does become humbling though when you take.
I didn't go to MIT, just it's like, just the thing I know about them.
But when you take like some of these really challenging classes, and the average is a 30 on a test when you're used to getting hundreds or
95s and 100s.
Yeah. But I remember it was like physical chemistry and taking it, and I think the average is a 30, and I think I probably got a 32, and I was like, okay, but then some jerk got like a 95 and screws it all up for everybody. And that person was number 1 in our class. So. Well, and Rachel, I wanted to touch on this too, just briefly, because I know when we were talking on the phone, you also, when you were in college, you were also a student athlete too, which is.
I was for 2 years. I was
not
a
an
diver.
easy thing to juggle.
And yeah, I loved the sport. But as a D1 athlete, it consumes a huge chunk of your life. And if you're trying to do that with engineering, it's really, really challenging. And I wasn't close with the other divers. They were perfectly nice people. They just weren't my friends.
Yeah.
I think it's easier if your friends are your teammates, because then your practices and your conditioning workouts and your early morning meets are friend time.
Yeah.
But I was spending all of this time in the gym, in the pool, on the road with people I didn't need to be hanging out with. Like, again, nothing wrong with them. I like them perfectly well. They just were never going to be the people I spent my time with outside of class. So I'm spending all of my time in class or in the pool or at the gym, and had ended up with very little time for the socializing I wanted to do in college. And so I noped out after sophomore year because it was it just wasn't serving me, and it didn't work out long term. Like I said, and I think for the people for whom their teammates are their friends, I think it works easier. But D1 sports is so demanding, and engineering is so demanding, and they are very hard to make work together. You'll notice very few D1 athletes are pursuing engineering degrees.
Yeah, that stat does not surprise me. Well, Rachel, we are pretty much out of time, but I wanted to ask you this, and I kind of touched on it, so I'm repeating myself a little bit. But knowing the bobs, and I wouldn't even call it bobs and weaves, the weaves that you had to where you are now, what advice would you give young Rachel?
Try to control less.
That is good advice.
And also I would say be less in a hurry. As a super high achiever, I was always looking for what's next. Like I said, by the end of 7th grade, I had mapped out every class I planned on taking through high school. That didn't leave a lot of opportunity for other things. I planned out all my volunteer hours and all of my practices and I wonder how Odyssey of the Mind wasn't planned, and it changed the whole course of my life. And I wonder if there were things I missed along the way because I was so focused on getting through all of the things, every check mark. And look, my life is great. I have a great marriage and a great family and a great job, but also I graduated college and I was married within 2 years and had a baby a few years after that, and then another baby, and then another baby, and then bought the house and had the career and did the master's. And like, it was all about checking these boxes. I've wound up in a place I'm super happy with, but I wonder if there were aha moments like Odyssey of the Mind along the way that I missed for having planned so rigorously, for having been in such a hurry to check off all of those life milestones.
Yeah, like maybe
so try to control less and be less in a hurry.
Yeah, stop and smell the roses a little bit.
A little bit. I'm an osmic, so I can't, but
the figurative roses.
I'll appreciate the foliage.
It's funny that you said that. My husband and I had this conversation over the weekend because we were the same way, and talking about how, like, after college, the 2 a.m. night stopped because we went to law school and med school, and all of our friends were going out and having a great time at 22, and we were studying, and then we got married right away, a kid. But I said, I wouldn't go back and change it because I love where I am right now, and we're finally at a place where our kids are the same age. Like, you're not chasing a toddler, making sure they're not trying to kill them.
So grateful to these ages are so great.
I would freeze this period of my life forever if I could. Like, it's just the kids' ages are great, like the things I feel like in my career or stuff, but I'm also not going after those box checking anymore, right? Like, I'm just sort of happy with where I am and being okay with that. And it's the first time in my early 40s, right, that I'm just like, okay, this is good. And I just wish I had that same attitude 20 years ago. So I appreciate that advice to your younger self. That's the same advice I would have given to my younger self.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Because Rachel, when you're talking about like how you mapped everything out, I'm like, oh, that reminds me so much of myself. Like, and I also like changed my mind like 6 times, I feel like, but I still had it. Like, I remember doing exactly what you're doing, like mapping out the classes, being so eager to go to college, going to summer school just to like do more coursework for fun. Like, I was like, what the hell's wrong with me? Like, I should have worked at I should have been a cocktail waitress and getting drunk with my friends. But instead I was like worried about, I got to take organic chemistry this summer so I can be ahead, in the fall. Like, what's the fun in that? And now I'm a lawyer. Why did I worry so much about organic chemistry?
My best friend in college, he was always going pre-med, but because pre-med isn't its own degree program, he could sort of choose whatever major he wanted in undergrad. And every week he'd come in with the course book and he'd sit down and he'd look through with me and he'd go, well, maybe this week I'll be a music major, and maybe this week I'll be an American history major. And he just had to make sure he got the right,
Yeah.
chem and bio classes in, and you can still manage that with other majors. Didn't have to be a science major. And then he asked me, he's like, what if there were no career ramifications, what would you pick for a major? And I was like, mechanical engineering. Like, how are you picking? I was like, of course, I want to be a mechanical engineer. That's the major I want. That was the major I wanted to do. And I just couldn't, I was like, I don't understand how other people pick. But again, it was so, I couldn't have let myself wonder about other things.
Yeah.
I had been set on that path years before, and I was going to go all the way down it.
Well, and I also think though it was a good path for you too, because now, like, even though you took a turn, like you kind of ended up doing, I think, exactly what you should be doing.
Yeah, it all worked out, and yeah, I do wonder what a little more of a relaxed pace would have, if there were opportunities I wasn't looking for because I was so busy checking all of my boxes. To Jen's point earlier, I turned 40. And I kind of looked and I was like, oh, I did all the things. I did the graduate degree. I did the kids. I did the house. I did the career. Now what? I've got like a whole second half of my life. Yeah. And I don't have anything planned.
What are you going to
do? Like for a while, I felt really unmoored. It was so long in this grind, my whole life in this sort of academic and achievement grind, that I didn't ever come up for air or wonder. And I was like, it's sort of very refreshing in my early 40s to say, I have a lot more capacity to do other things if I want. And yeah, my kids are no longer toddlers. They're all in elementary and middle school. We're past the running around with diapers phase. They get on the bus in the morning, they get off the bus in the afternoon, they do their whatever they're doing in the afternoon, so they can kind of take care of themselves for a little while now. And it's just, I don't know yet. I don't know what grown up me is going to do, but it's really interesting to kind of wake up feeling like, oh, there was such a set plan for all of that first half of your life, and the second half just doesn't have nearly the same kind of roadmap.
Yeah, but that's okay. I feel like it's almost designed that way because now you're a little calmer, you're more relaxed, and you probably can just maybe take it as it comes. But I have a feeling you're going to come up with some sort of plan.
I'll figure something out. I'm sure of it. But yeah, you're right. If I had been 25 with no plan, I'm not sure I would have made a great decisions.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I feel like you may have, but
part of it was the plan, though, right? Part of it was the guardrails, and I maybe in my 40s don't need them so much anymore.
Well, Rachel, thank you so much for coming on. I learned so much today. I learned way more than I expected to learn. And I hope all our listeners learned a lot too. So of course, for all our listeners out there, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to Claims Never Sleep. You can find us on your favorite streaming platform, and you can also find us on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Meghan Henry.